Alright, and welcome to this lesson where we're going to continue on developing the events page. So the first port of call is to take our events data and apply it to the full calendar. And there is lots of ways you can actually approach this. But we're going to have to do it in such a way that not only is the calendar going to receive the data, but the data from the events.php file is going to be easily accessible to us because it can't be buried in some plugin like full calendar and we get no access to the data because don't forget we have to code up the side navigational menu, and therefore if we are to do that we need access to the events data. So what I'm going to do first of all is I'm going to grab this JSON data and then I'm going to convert it into a JavaScript readable array full of objects, and then obviously we can interact with the data from there. And actually jQuery provides a method that allows us to not only get the JSON but also converts it automatically into JavaScript. And so if you actually take a look at the JSON file, you'll notice that the syntax is very similar to JavaScript, and that was because it was effectively founded on a little bit of JavaScript, because what you have is the square brackets which indicates an array, the same as JavaScript, and then inside of the array you have what I like to call nodes, but effectively they are objects inside of JavaScript and you define them with the curly brackets right here, so that's again the same. And then also you have the properties, and the only difference here is the fact that the properties in JavaScript do not have quotes around them. So that's the only difference there. And also the JSON parser is very good at recognizing certain strings like this string, which understands that this is a date and a time. And so this is actually converted into a date and a time object in JavaScript, again making the data more interactive. You're probably going, well, if it did that for this string, it recognizes that it's a date and a time, surely it will recognize a number and convert it to a number and not leave it as a string. Well, actually, it leaves it as a string, which can be beneficial in some cases and not in others. But however, it's not that difficult to change it to a number if you wanted to. But right now, I'm just going to leave it as is, and when we import it, that will still be a string. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, put in the $sign, and we're not going to target any specific element or anything like that, so we don't have to put the brackets in. And so what I can do is just put the $sign in and say dot get JSON. So this method will allow me to, first of all, target the JSON file. So we need to, in a string, go up out the directory, take a look at the JSON directory, and inside of there we want to look at the events.php file and grab out its contents. And that's effectively it. So now it knows where the file is, it knows what data it needs to grab, and so the next parameter that I need to define is a function. So this function is basically a return function. So once it's fetched the data from that file, converted it into a JavaScript readable array full of objects, it then returns data. And of course the callback function is going to receive that data through an argument. So I'm just going to say data. So it's gone out, it's fetched the file, it's converted it into an array full of readable objects, and of course it's passed into the data argument. Just think of it like a variable, and it contains data. And of course it contains the array full of objects. That's it. That's all that's happening right there. And so now what I can do is take that data and apply it to our calendar. Now instead of me saying $sign and then targeting the ID calendar and then running the full calendar method, what I can do is store this inside of a variable called cal, and then what I can do is say cal.fullCalendar. So I'm running the full calendar method, and so once I've done that I can then say now we want to actually grab the data. And so there is a method that we can run with the full calendar that is add event source. And of course what we can do is provide it the data that has been returned via this method. So I can just say data right there and then end it with a semicolon. Once you do that, save it, and that data will be passed to the full calendar plugin, and then it will take the data and interpret it. So then what you get is your events. It's that easy. And so now that we've done that, it's now made this very accessible for us for the actual side menu. And so what you can do is create a variable called file. So now I'm taking it out of the scope of this function right here. And so I have a variable file. It currently contains absolutely nothing, but now I want to assign a value. So I say file, so I'm pointing to that variable. I'm assigning it a value, and that value is going to be data. And so now it actually contains an array full of objects that we can interact with. And so that's why I've gone to such lengths to load in the data this way, and not through the plugin itself, because that can actually cause a problem. So now that I've done that, let's go ahead and save this, and we'll stop with the JavaScript for a little bit. I think we should take a rest from that, and now obviously take a look at styling up our events. So let's go ahead and move over to the events.scss file, and then let's take a look at the actual markup, because again, we need to know what we have to style and all of its classes and everything else. So what I'm going to do is again go to the main parent div with the ID of calendar. I'm going to copy as HTML, and then don't forget we need to put it through the beautifier and then paste it into this file right here. So I've gone ahead and done that, and I've also collapsed the code so we can see the structure. And so first of all, we have that table, which is the header, which we've already styled, that top bit right there. Then also we have the main content, which we styled the table right here. So that's the table that includes that little yellow header and all the dates and so on and so forth. But now what we want to do is focus on this div element. So this div element is over the top of the table element, and that div element contains all of the events. So each one of these events has an anchor right here, and that's only because we've actually put on the URL right here. If we didn't have the URL, the anchor wouldn't be there. So we must remember that when styling, the anchors are optional. Then we have a div element inside of there, and this is just wrapping around it. So effectively, if you actually look at the website, you will notice that you have, you know, this div element right here that is stretched out. But then also you have the span that's inside of there, which is just the text. So we only have a very few amount of elements that are repeated over and over and over again. And so what I can do is go ahead and take a look at the SCSS file right here. And what I want to do is target, first of all, the main div, which is going to be the FC event inner, and that has that class right there. So let's copy that out and paste that in. And then what I can do is set the margin top to 1 pixel. So because you can have more than one event on a day, you sort of want to break them up a little bit. So that's why I'm putting the margin top on there. Then also you have the padding. So I'm going to have 3 pixels for the top and the bottom. And then I'm going to have 5 pixels to the left and to the right. That way we keep the text away from the edges. Then also we have the font size. So that's going to be 12 pixels. Then also we have the background color. So the background is going to be the dark yellow color. And then what I want to do is change the font color, and that is going to be text 2, which is the white text color. And then also we have the mix-ins. So the mix-ins, we're going to include the border radius mix-in, and we just want a very small border radius, so 2 pixels should do right here because these events aren't very big. And then also we're going to have the transition mix-in, and the only reason why is because again we have the anchor, which is going to change its style. So I want a nice animation on here, so I'm going to say transition, all available CSS properties in 0.3 of a second or 300 milliseconds. So I'm going to save that and hit refresh. So this is looking good, but the only thing is the long event should actually go to the 26th. So let's take a look at that data right now, and we can see with the long event that the end is actually in the 2nd month, whereas the start is in the 3rd. So I'm going to have to change that to the 3rd month, and then it will go to the 26th, just like so. Alright, so now that we've solved that problem, what I want to do is bring the events closer to the actual day numbers, because we need to maximize our space, and you can have more than one event on one particular day. So we need to maximize as much space as possible. So let's go over to our SCSS file, and to move this up, I'm actually going to target the parent. So the reason why I targeted the inner first of all is so that we can actually see the positioning. And now what we can do is target the parent, which is our FC event container right here. So let's copy that out. And then what I can do is simply set the margin top to -10 pixels. And that way it's actually going to move it upwards. And then once I've done that, what I want to do is make sure that I put the hover state in here. So let's go ahead and style that up. So what I want to do is target all the anchors with the class of FC-event, and again they must be in the hover state, so let's make sure that anchor has that class and is also being hovered over. And then we want to target the div FC event inner that is inside of the anchor. And then because we have that transition on here, we can transition the CSS properties such as the background CSS property, which I'll change the background to yellow. Then also I'll change the font color to be text 1, which will be the brown text color. And if I save that now and I hit refresh, you'll notice that we get that nice hover over. So now I want my full calendar to be a bit more interactive, because currently I can't drag and drop the events like I could do on the full calendars website, and I also can't resize either. So what I need to do is make this editable. And so what you need to do is go to the JavaScript file, and here where we're setting up the button text and the header and so forth, put another comma in there because we want to define another option, which is editable. And editable is by default set to false. Now what we want to do is set it to true. And then just go ahead and save that, hit refresh, and now you're able to see we can drag and drop just like so, and the repeat events always stay together, and you are actually able to resize. Now, if you actually take a look at this, when we inspect it, you'll be able to see we have this development now with the class UI resizable handle. So I'm just going to copy that class out because currently that isn't in our file right here because we didn't have editable set to true. So what I can do is target that element, because what's happening is instead of this being on the end right here where I can resize, number one, it's not very clear, and number two, it's actually taking up all this space, which we're very limited in space already. So what I want to do is set the position to absolute because I need it to go over the top of this main inner div right here, and then we can set the positioning, so it's going to be top 0, so it goes right to the top and all the way over to the right as well. Then also I want to change the cursor so we can actually see that this does mean we want to resize something. So set the cursor to be EW-resize. So what that actually means is east and west. So I can just save this now and hit refresh. And you'll notice I get the east and the west, just like so, and I can just resize it like that, and you're able to see how easy this actually is. And so once we've played around with this, what I can do now is focus my attention on the left-hand side navigational menu. So let's open up the JavaScript file, and the first thing I want to do is target the previous and next buttons. The reason being is because they allow us to iterate through the months, weeks, or days. Now, regardless of whether we're in week view or in day view, we always want to show the relevant events for that month in the left-hand side navigation or in the navigation for the mobile version of this particular page. So we're always going to show the events for the month rather than, obviously the month, week, and day. We're not going to be that specific. We're just going to always stick with a month for this particular menu. And so what I want to do now is obviously target the previous and next buttons that allow you to iterate through a month, week, or day, and make sure that it doesn't go into a new month. And if it does go into a new month, then we need to update the menu. So what I'm going to do is target both those elements. So they both have a class on here. So let me just go ahead and put that in. Class FC-button hyphen, and then you have prev first of all, and then you have FC button next. And then we're going to wait until they are clicked. So I'm going to say dot on, so I'm going to listen out for an event. That event is going to be the click event, and then I'm going to call back a function once those elements have been clicked. And then inside of there, let's just go ahead and play around with the console. So I'm going to say console.log, and inside of here, you can pass in a variable and anything you want pretty much. But in this case, I'm just going to pass in a simple string and say, yeah, they were clicked. And then I can just end it like so. So I can save that, hit refresh, And now what you will notice is when we hit inspect element, and again all browsers will pretty much have a console window, you just need to know how to find it, but with Google Chrome you can just right click, inspect element, and open the console tab, and then when you click on one of these you'll notice it shows in the console. So thank you for joining me in this lesson, and please join me in the next lesson where we'll continue on developing the events page.